with our if anyone has any questions, feel free to reach out about the recording. I will also share our YouTube channel, and that is where we upload all of our videos that we do in these sessions here. So if you've attended a past session or you missed a past one, all of them are going to be in there on our YouTube channel at the link that I just sent. We're about at a 1 to 2 week delay in uploading the video. So this one will be up over the next 2 weeks, and y'all can check out what it is that we have going on our YouTube channel in the meantime. So for our session today, though, we will be talking through something that I have found to be very, very fun throughout my own career, which is building your own team of advocates. And usually I have an intro slide when I dive into the content here, but I won't be sharing any slides. I'll just be chatting with you all. So we'll get into it a little bit. But my background is primarily, I've worked in startups most of my career, but at the last startup I was in, I was focused heavily on mentors, the power of mentoring, what it can do for folks of all ages, and how we can really leverage mentorship to support ourselves, to grow, and to nurture what it is that we need nurtured within our careers. So I learned from that role that there were a lot of relationships that could really help move along really every single problem area that you might have. So I started recognizing the importance of having really targeted mentorship, targeted mentors specifically. Initially, I started out in my career with mentors that were very focused on the whole spectrum of my life, talking about my career, talking about siblings, because you can get into those nitty-gritty things with mentors. But I was taking a more we can call it like an umbrella approach. And what I found over time that it was actually more beneficial for me to get more granular with my mentors and talk with them about specific problem areas that I had in my life. So I was able to really get into that more nitty gritty of what I wanted my life to look like, the problem areas that they had, maybe them sharing some wisdom that they had, whether it be managing their company's finances or managing their family. Across the board, I really took an open canvas approach. If you never had the experience of trying to acquire a mentor, it kind of can happen a little bit natural or it can feel natural to the mentor, but maybe not as natural to you. So what I mean by that is that, hi Barth, welcome in. Happy to have you here. Feel free to drop in your LinkedIn. We're just chatting a little bit about, hi Cassio. Thank you. So when you are finding your mentor and you're sort of looking outside of the current people that you face with or interface with day to day, what you can really do is acknowledge that individual's strength and kind of be cherry picking for strength, looking out for where folks can really support you in areas that you may have your own weaknesses in. So a few weeks ago, we sat down and we wrote out all of our different values. When you're going to be finding your mentor, those values are going to be key because your mentor, you're going to want to make sure that they match those same values. And the reason why I say that is because if they don't match the same values that you have, you might end up coming back to the drawing board, finding new mentors, new sources. So it's important just right out of the gate to align on your values. That can be just a conversation on your first initial call and you saying this is what I care a lot about. What do you care about? And that will help sort of level set in what they might be looking for and what you are looking for in a mentor. Now, when you are first initially setting up the relationship with your mentor, it can be someone that you met at an event. I just mentioned earlier on this call that I met a bunch of people at conferences. So that's also a really great way to meet people. But I've also acquired mentors just through outreach, pure outreach. And one person in particular I actually want to speak to and give you all the example of is a professional that is autistic, and he has worked in the operations field for years. I would maybe even 25 years. And he's highly educated. He's been in, I'm not sure what enterprise. He's been in executive roles for his whole entire career. And he's had the opportunity to speak to some really, really, really amazing people. while still holding on to his autistic identity and making space for that. And that was something that I had recognized that I really admired in him through his content online, specifically on LinkedIn. And I also recognized that he was able to, as I said earlier, able to create that space around his autism. And I really admired that. And I wanted to emulate some of that. So, what I did is I sent out a message to him just saying, "Hi, my name is Steph. I really admire your content because I think you embody radical authenticity very beautifully for the autistic community. And I think that there is a lot of good that you're doing just by sharing your voice." When I tell you that the message that I got back was in less than an hour on a Saturday morning, I was bewildered. I didn't expect to hear back from him. Honestly, I just sent the message out into the void and I ended up hearing back. And oftentimes that is what ends up happening, especially when you're able to get a little bit more granular. And we have a message in the chat that I just want to acknowledge. Cassio sent through. "I gave up masking. I put in my LinkedIn profile the Audi ADHD badge." Oh, I love to hear that. Oh, I'm so happy to hear that. That's awesome. So for those of you that might not be familiar, what Cassio, I think, is referring to is, and I'll show you the LinkedIn badge just really quickly. It's this right here. So your initial upfront, when anyone sees your profile, the first thing they see is this blurb about you. It's almost even more powerful than the actual bio that you're putting on LinkedIn. This one down here, people don't really read this. I will tell you, when I go to people's LinkedIn profiles, I'm not reading this. I'm looking right here to see what are the standout qualities, kind of like how we would use bullet points in a resume. And then I'm looking what their experience was, and I'm looking at what they're posting, specifically how they're reacting. So looking at their comments, how they carry themselves on social media can tell you a lot about someone. If they're someone who believes in positivity and putting that out in the world and getting it back to them, those are really great things to tune into on your profile. But yeah, Cassia, I love that you called that out. This is super, super helpful. If you don't have it bulked up on your page, I really, really recommend adding it. It's just a good way for other folks to get to know you. So thanks, Cassio. I didn't feel like, Joy said, "I don't feel like I can do that in my area. I live in a very small town in rural Virginia." Yeah, Joy, it's such a personal decision to add your neurodiversity to your tag online. But if it is something that you can do, I always encourage folks to do it. You never know who's reading your resume, and they might be someone who really resonates with your radical authenticity and values that. So that would be my hope for all of our employers. But yeah, I totally understand living in a small rural town because I used to live in one of those too. All right. So getting back to a little bit about the content around building your mentor, I reached out to that mentor or that individual and I asked if I could just borrow 10 minutes of his time. He actually ended up giving me 45 minutes of his time, which I was completely impressed. I was just so excited and appreciative of. I ended up talking to him about radical authenticity, how to bring autism in the workplace, how to create space for folks below you when you're working in leadership positions, how to support others. So it was really just this like holistic approach that I brought to him, which was a lot of questions. And he was thrilled to answer them. And oftentimes that's what you'll find with folks. I get a lot of early career folks that will reach out to me and ask, how did you break through the job market? How did my biggest advice was creating an environment where I genuinely stood out. And if anyone looks at my LinkedIn, you can tell that I pretty clearly stand out. And that was all by design. That just helps employers remember your name. It helps them get to know you a little bit better. We're all looking for those third spaces that we've been talking online about for so long and have really helped us open ourselves up to even more community, which ultimately leads to these mentor relationships that can really help you unlock your team. Hi, Jhillika.
Hey, Steph. Hey, everyone. Thank you for tuning in with us. I had unstable Wi-Fi, but now we are fully stable. So I'm excited to dive in. And Steph, thanks for like making this happen for everyone.
Absolutely. Yeah, I was just sharing a little bit about my one of my first mentors, and we were sharing how we can really use LinkedIn as a tool to foster and curate these mentor relationships even further than they already exist today. If you already have those like mentor roles in your life. And then for more incoming mentors, do as I just gave that case study. You have the opportunity to really just reach out, cold outreach, and ask them how they can sort of help move your career along in a way that feels easy for them. And oftentimes that is just a question bank and doing something along the lines of an informational interview. If you've heard of that. Wow, 45 minutes radical authenticity. Yeah, awesome. Okay, so that is one way to reach out. And then once you have that relationship already fortified and you've answered or you've asked all of those questions and they've given you such strong information, such amazing insight, what you'll want to do with that information, that's not dead information. Take all of that and give it 1 to 2 weeks, let it marinate, let it sit a little bit, and then reach back out to that mentor and tell them how put that work into play. Tell them how you were able to integrate those different findings that they had, and watch really their face light up. Folks really do want to help each other, and it's a really, really great opportunity to let other people in and hopefully do a little bit of that for your career.
100%. Yeah, just to tag on that, I think when, let's say someone gives you some advice, right? And then you act on that advice and you respond back and say, "Hey, I acted on your advice." People are so much more likely to actually like want to help you even more because it's like, "Okay, wow, they actually valued what I said. They've taken it to heart and they've acted on it." And then that just builds so much more trust and it also helps them perceive you as someone who's very action oriented. And so they know that every moment of time they're investing into you, they're going to have like, you're going to yield a ton of value from it. So people are going to more likely going to want to like support you and mentor you. I will say just from like experience, I mean, the whole platform's name is Mentra. So clearly mentorship is like very important to us. And I oftentimes like one activity I'd encourage everyone here to do is write out like what are the areas of your life that you want to grow in, maybe pick like 5 dimensions or even 3 or even one where it's like, all right, I want to grow in my career. I'm going to grow in my health. I want to grow in my self-advocacy. I want to grow in my like subject matter expertise in this area. And then like go online and find people. And even if whether that's influencers, whether that's content creators, or maybe like people who work at a desired company or people who are doing that pretty well. And then, yeah, write out a list, and figure out like what is your why? What is your intention behind why you want to grow in that area? And then reach out. And that's something that we're working on integrating into our AI is giving you templates for how to reach out. Something that came up, there's some like very classic cheesy lines like I want to pick your brain on X, Y, and Z. And that's recommended like to kind of avoid the generic types of messages, but something that's more deeply like personal. Like I noticed on your profile, you're really into birds or you're really into computer science or computer engineering. Like I would love to talk to you more about that and get your thoughts as I'm looking to grow in that area of my life. The other thing, like going to events and like putting yourself out there, whether that's virtual events or in-person events, and having something that you're remembered for. I would say like asking probably the most important thing when it comes to mentorship is also just like asking really thoughtful questions because that can make all of the difference. Like if you're deeply actively listening and then responding with something that like not only is, about what that person said, but is something very thoughtful that, you know, came out of what they said, that can be just extremely powerful as well to demonstrate that you have thoughts on this and you have been thinking about it for a while. So yeah, those are just some like things that come top of mind. Happy to like dive into specific examples. Also, I asked to drop in the chat of like what brings folks here today, like what's of interest to you, what should we dive more into? Like feel free to drop it in the chat. And it could even be like very, very hyper tailored questions to your own specific needs, because I'm sure some it'll help other people on the call as well. Barth said, Jack of all trades, public mentors, Ray Dalio, Tim Ferriss, Naval. What do you think? Ooh, those are some great names. Those are definitely very good public mentors. Those are probably harder folks to read. I love Naval Ravikant's book, The Almanac of Naval Ravikant. If anyone wants a book recommendation, highly recommend that one. Tim Ferriss, 4 Hour Work Week, Ray Dalio as well. Yeah, I sometimes say that like a lot of now YouTube has a lot of AI generated content trained on a lot of these speakers. So sometimes like, it's really helpful, even if you can't reach that mentor, but listening to their content, I sometimes will just put my headphones in and go for a walk. And like, I feel like I'm downloading information, almost like the consciousness of these people from their lived experience. Like, you can almost utilize them as mentors, like asynchronous mentors, where they're just giving you information. Yeah, you can literally have them at your ears and like understand like how they frame mental models, how they think about things. And then I think that when you bring those people up in conversations with real mentors, like if you both believe and subscribe to those philosophies of those people, then it can just create a lot more like opportunity for shared conversation around those like what those people believe in. So like Naval really talks about, entrepreneurship and work-life balance and becoming like, financial freedom. And so those are topics then you can start to like center your conversation around. So I love, Bart, that you brought up those people because you might not be able to talk to them directly, but those are cool people to like bring up in conversation, especially with mentors, because then they know like, okay, you are listening to these like thinkers that they might have like a shared interest in. Joy Baden says, my mentors seem to enjoy my life experience in exchange for their professional understanding / knowledge. Love that. They enjoy my life experience. Yeah. Yeah, I think like a lot of conversations with mentors, it's really helpful like to find a good balance where you want to be sharing information about yourself and then tying it back into like a question that you have for them. And it's like kind of like a dance in that sense. If you're able to share like, hey, this is my lived experience. This is really something really interesting that happened to me. Like, how do you think I should navigate this situation? Then the mentor feels like they're genuinely adding value to your life. So, whereas like sometimes I've seen calls where people have just talked about themselves only, and the mentor's like, all right, well, I'm not really adding much value here other than like being a listener. But that could be done asynchronously too. And so, yeah, it's like an interesting dance. I would highly recommend prior to the mentorship calls, like putting together 3 to 5 questions for what you'd want to dive deeper into. And then if there's a lot of information on the call being given to you, like write it down. Like some a thought might pop up, just like write down a question that might come up later. And sometimes when I get over bombarded with information from a mentor, I'll say like, all right, I have 3 thoughts on that. And then we'll go into each one. So yeah, it helps kind of structure the conversation a bit more as well. But yeah, sharing life experience is great. And then getting their knowledge or understanding is great. One thing I will call out about mentors too is just like sometimes it's so important to pick the right mentors as well. Because often like you want to find someone who already has the desired outcome of what you're looking for. Sometimes people like love to give advice, but might not have reached that goal. Or, I say like, if you're getting marriage advice, like get it from like a happily married couple, or like a therapist, you know what I mean? Like try to find someone who has like lived through the experience and knows and has come out the other side successful. And so picking your mentors is also really important. And then also deciding and discerning like what advice to take and not take is really helpful. Don't let like sometimes people will share like information, but you have to at the end of the day make the judgment call of like what you're going to incorporate or not. So the more data points you have about their success, the better. So yeah, those are some thoughts on there. I say LinkedIn. Steph says a creator on LinkedIn. His name is Uday. Oh, I missed that part, but that's cool. We have some questions that we are going to dive into in this call that Steph put together. And we'll also take questions from the chat as we go along. Bart says, what about AI as a mentor? That's an amazing question. I love AI as a mentor because it literally is taking all the information from the internet and consolidating it and then making the best possible recommendation for you. It's also hyper logical. So you're getting to like recommendations that are not driven by ego or emotion or, they're just very like rational and based on best practices. So I would say like 100% AI as a mentor is the way to go, especially for like big decisions to make or if you're weighing something. I would, that's actually, I will say after ChatGPT came out, my reliance on mentors went down significantly because I was like, wow, I don't need to hit up people as much. Though I would still say, like, even if you're not relying on mentors, like keeping the connection going. So one thing that like personally I've struggled with, I don't know if anyone's taken like the Strengths Finder test, but there's this one trait called activator, which means you're really good at starting things, but it's harder to follow through. And I think all relationships with mentors, like it's so important to make sure you're not just getting the advice, but you're like following through and maintaining that relationship because you never know when, life situations come up and you want to ask them a question. So, like every so often, every few months, I might even just like message my mentor and just ask, hey, like, how are you doing? How's life? And that just helps like rekindle that connection. And just like you can give a check-in yourself, like quick update, quick life update, here's what's going on. And it doesn't require a call or anything necessarily, but even just keeping like those touch points over text can be really helpful. But yes, AI as a mentor is a great way to go. Joy says, I have a question, new mentor, and every week she calls and says, what can I help you with? Knee-jerk reaction, nothing. How do I bridge that? I'm not used to asking for help, nor do I know how to articulate the unknowns. Oh, that's a good question. Okay, well, I guess like I'm curious how you got this mentor and what like their expertise is specifically because yeah, you want to understand like what you can tailor the questions towards and like what area you're looking for help with. Okay, exec and sales. Okay. And it depends. Like if you're trying to get, let's say, a job as a sales, as an exec in sales, and you're like trying to figure out the pathway to get there, I guess like step one is use AI mentor, figure out like, okay, you know, I want to get this career path. I'm guessing you'd have to confirm. I'm assuming that you're also looking for a career in sales. Okay, no. I guess like what is the yeah, Joy, feel free to like type or share what is like the goal for this mentor and like kind of how you got connected with them so we can tailor it. And while you're typing, Ashley says AI mirrors you. It adapts to tone, prompts, and reinforcement. If you want an AI mentor, prompt it that way. Yes, 100%. Yeah. Yeah, it's only getting better and better. Like, it's amazing how ChatGPT, even across chats, knows who you are. And I always say, like, so there's this joke that if you tell chat at the end of every message, like, thank you so much, like, you're the best, you're amazing, I love you, chat will, like, respond with that same love back. And, like, so it's like, what you give out into the world, you get back. And so it's like, when you're looking for mentorship, yeah, you want to kind of prompt it in a way where it's like, all right, assume that you are my, ex sales mentor. I'm looking to grow in these areas, use the principles of like these thinkers, and then, it'll like go and search the internet for information about, let's say, like Tim Ferriss or Naval, and then it'll like recommend things that are in alignment with their philosophies too. I will say the mirroring thing is interesting. There's also controversy that like it's just mirroring, so it's not factual or it's not like, it's just saying what you wanted to say. And I've tested that before, and it actually is not always the case. Like sometimes you can prompt things a certain way, but that's all in the prompting. Okay, next. Joy says, no, they're randomly assigned as based on the program I joined through the schools. Okay. Yeah, I guess like Steph, open to thoughts on this. Just the first thought that comes to mind is like figuring out what this exec in sales is really good at. Like in this scenario, being in sales is not easy. Like there's probably this person's probably good at like managing teams, learning to grow in a leadership position, learning to sell themselves, learning to sell their product. It's like just those four things there are skills that are applicable across like many domains, not just sales. So like identifying, all right, this person clearly has these strengths, which has allowed them to be in this position successfully. And tailoring questions to that can be really, really powerful. Understanding, yeah, you're good at these things. And so like, okay, how do you sell, how did you start in your career? Where did you, how did you grow into an executive position? Like, were there any, I always like very spicy questions that make them really deeply think. Like, was there any like pivotal moment in your career that really like impressed someone or disappointed someone? And how could you have done it differently? And so like starting by like really asking really good questions to identify like someone else's strengths and where they've shined. And then really like we're all, as AI is as well, we're all mirrors. And so we can kind of learn from like what allowed them to thrive in that. And then, yeah, if they're good at sales, I mean, that's just like selling yourself is just an important skill for life in general, whether it's in interviews or meeting, getting influencing someone or, you know, getting investment or getting a job. And so there's skills there that can be learned. So yeah, everyone has strengths. And I think like uncovering that and asking those questions, like sometimes it can feel like you're hitting a wall, but just know that like everyone's personality and life experiences are so deep and so vast that you could technically talk to someone forever if you just keep asking them questions. And you could probably get to like what has made them really successful and then learn how you could apply that in your life. So hopefully that's helpful, Ashley. Feel free to like add more or sorry, Joy. Feel free to add more context in there for like what you're looking for and how you would want this mentor to be most helpful for you or anything you've learned from the mentor so far. But I'll pass it over to Steph as well, if you want to dive into some other questions too.
Yeah, no, I think those are really great tips and tricks that you can use to help really make the most of the mentor relationship that you do have, Joy. I think one thing that comes to mind just based on what you've shared about your experiences thus far that might be helpful is leveraging the mentor and the mentor relationship specifically for pivot points. So I know that you're entering the job market soon. So if there's opportunity for you to leverage what those big transitions might look like, whether they be, a transition. I really think that the mentor that you have probably has had quite a few transitions, so they might be able to relate to you in that way. And then, as Jhillika said, like getting into the job market, those are both really great entry points.
Yeah. Oh, I see a question here. Mentor rates? How much would you pay for help? I'd love to take that before we dive in real quick. Okay, so it totally depends on the person's expertise. I don't know if y'all have seen this new platform that just released. I forget, let me find the name of it, but it's a platform where you can pay for an hour of a mentor's time. And I've been seeing ads for it everywhere. And it's like the founder of Loom and the, founder of like Instacart. And each person has their own like special sauce that they bring to those calls. I believe the hourly rate for those individuals are like between $750 to $1,000 for an hour. And so, I mean, it's yes, it's a lot of money. It's also like if you come into that meeting and you come in with the questions that you want, and especially if they like mirror something that you're trying to achieve in your life, it can be like the most highest ROI of your time to be able to like go into that meeting with the most value that you can generate out of it. So it really is like what you put into each meeting, right? And I'm gonna try to find, I'm not sure if you've heard of this platform, Steph, but that's just like an example. If you're paying is that 70,000 or seven? No, no, I said 1,000 USD for an hour of their time. Not 70,000. That's like way too much. Maybe that's like, I don't know, like Elon Musk or something, but I don't even think that would be worth it. But yeah, I would say depends on your mentor, depends on like the success they've, achieved. It depends on how valuable their time is as well. Like if they're really balancing a lot of things. I think it's still helpful to pay though, because even if it's a nominal amount, even if it's like $50, $100, depending on like what service you're using, just because if there's an investment from your end, you're probably going to come to it a lot more prepared and value the time a lot better. Though the mentorship we've been talking about on this call has been mostly like reaching out to people because a lot of people like will extend a hand out of just goodwill, And even if people are busy and don't have the time to meet with you on a call, I highly recommend just dropping in a question in a chat to them and just asking, anything you want online, like, hey, I'm dealing with this situation, like how would you handle it? Maybe just keep it short though, because a lot of times mentors are like juggling a lot of things. So like ask ChatGPT to shorten it into like a succinct text message or a call or email. And that's the other thing is I think mentors like to build a really personal relationship, the platform is also somewhat important. So for example, email is probably the most impersonal. LinkedIn is second. or equal to email. And you can still reach out to people there. I would suggest though the best way to contact folks eventually is to get to a point where you're texting them directly or you're WhatsApp messaging them. And that has built like a much closer relationship to them. And that way you can drop things in the chat with them whenever you want, or you can WhatsApp them directly. So hopefully that's helpful. Barth says, well, who knows? If you get in touch with Bill Gates, it might be a cheap hour. Oh my gosh. Okay. Y'all, on that note, there's this really amazing book actually about kind of about mentorship. It's called The Third Door by Alex Banayan, and he was inspired by Tim Ferriss, and it's all about how to like game the system. And I think it has neurodivergence. Like it's an amazing book. Yes, Third Door. And it's actually about this, the author who is in med school and realizes that he's not going to gain a ton of value from it and would rather like try to interview people like Bill Gates and Lady Gaga and all these like entrepreneurs or people successful in their jobs and figure out like what was the common thread between all of these hyper successful people that got them to where they were. And what he noticed at the end of interviewing all of them, is the common thread is that they are always trying to find the third door, which is essentially like, and he describes it like trying to get into a nightclub. So it's kind of memorable. He says there's like three ways to get in. One is you're like VIP, you're born into wealth, you like get in easy because you have the money. Two is you are waiting in this long queue with everyone else, and it's just like quote unquote, like the neuronormative way to do things or like the standard, traditional way to do things. However, there's also this third door, which is actually an unseen door. It's like climbing under the window, like going through a bush, like finding the other way in. And he talks about like all of the interviews that he gets with Bill Gates and Lady Gaga and Steven Spielberg and all these people are by like taking that third door and taking that untraditional path. And so a lot of times it just takes like having our eyes open to like those unconventional things. But that's how he was able to get these folks as his mentors and how he was able to ask them questions and incorporate them into his book. So that's just an interesting side story, as you said, it talked about Bill Gates, where he was able to get in front of these people for free, and he framed it by saying like he was working on this book and he was trying to figure out, and he kind of name dropped and said, "Hey, I've interviewed these other people. Can you tell me like I would love to add you to this book as well?" So there's some strategy to it, which is cool. But yeah, I highly recommend that book. And it's a quick speed audio read. And honestly, it empowered me so much in life. So I would definitely recommend. Joy, thanks for dropping your LinkedIn. Everyone, feel free to drop your LinkedIns. I'd love to connect with y'all. Steph and I can keep the connections going. I see we're coming at time, so Steph, feel free to.
Yeah, everyone, thanks for dropping in your LinkedIn. Hopefully we're all connected, but yeah, if y'all want to get connected with Jhillika, if you even have your LinkedIn offhand, we can send that through in the chat too. Or I can find that in a few minutes. But as Jhillika said, we are coming up on time. And I wanted to share, y'all have been so in the loop on everything that we've been doing with the platform and the demo, but we are having another round and we wanted to reach out to you all. I know some of us here on this call have seen the first sort of demo launch of the platform, but we're excited to show another version. So if y'all have time on Friday, we are hosting a demo session and that will be at 12:30 EST. So if you're available, feel free to drop in your email and I'll send along the invite directly to you. But we'll be sharing a little bit about the platform, the updates that we've made since we spoke. Thank you, Perry. I'll send you along an invite in just a few minutes, but we'll all hop on the call together and we'll just have an opportunity to share the platform and talk through any feedback that y'all wanna give to us.
Yeah.
If you're not sure whether or not you want to join, feel free. I just dropped in my email. Feel free to reach out to me directly, and then I can get you set up on that with us.
Totally. Yeah, and just to conclude, like I love this topic so much. Mentors, I mean, Steph, I'm sure attests to this as well. Like personally, they've absolutely changed my life. And people are more giving than you would think. And people are like open to sharing life experiences. People also love to talk about themselves. And so if you're able to find someone who like you can connect with and keep that conversation going and treat them like a mentor, like it allows you to assimilate so much knowledge so fast from lived experience. And as we know from this call, to summarize, there's human mentors, there's AI mentors, and then there's like asynchronous mentors, let's call them, that are just people online that have written books and things. And now there's like AI generated content as well that you could learn, or like interviews that you could watch online. So there's always different forms of mentors. But when you, yeah, cultivate those relationships, like they can be incredibly helpful, not just for advice and wisdom, but also to unlock doors for you in the future. So yeah, keep crushing, keep, making it to meetings like this. Ooh, before finishing, tell us the Sam Altman's pitch, Jhillika. Absolutely, good question. Actually, yeah, so how that happened was we were in Charlotte, North Carolina, and we went to one of a startup event. And Charlotte's a pretty small town. There's not a ton of founders there. And there were around 7, 8 of us in this room, and we were all going around and pitching our ideas. And, we were talking about building a neurodiversity employment network and kind of the next LinkedIn for the neurodivergent population. And at the time we had, a term sheet from an investment group, which we didn't realize was actually like very unfair. And we kind of brought it up and we're like, hey, we've never done this before. We're looking for investment, but we're not sure if we should take these terms. They don't seem right. And someone heard us say that and they were like, yeah, absolutely not. Like, if you want to change the world, like, let me help you. And that was one of our first investor, Tim, who is the founder of Craftwork in Charlotte. And he actually went through the YC program for his first startup. And so, just like opening up and being vulnerable about like, hey, we're not sure about this situation. Like, we're not sure if we're being taken advantage of. Like, that was like one of the best things we could have shared, even though it was kind of personal, because then he immediately was like, all right, let me help. Because like clearly you've never done this before and you don't want to be in this vulnerable position. And yeah, and then he kind of helped us build our pitch deck. We like met with him the next night. We were literally like, please, like immediacy is really important too. Like just acting quickly is so helpful. People are like, all right, they're a fast mover. They're definitely going to be productive if they move, or like if someone moves fast, then it's a huge indicator of success, right? Because it means like you're able to get stuff done. And then met with us and then helped us build our pitch deck and then sent us a list of like his like investors that he knew of, and he said, let me know who I can introduce you to from this list. And we did research the very next day on every single person, and we said, these are the people we want to talk to and here's why. And immediately he made those intros. It was very short. It's literally like, you both have context, period. That was the intro. Limited work on his end, but then he attached our deck. And one of the people he introduced us to happened to be Sam Altman. We didn't even know who this person was. And he forwarded it to his fund manager. And his fund manager saw the deck and reached out and asked, and literally got on a call like 2 days later and asked us a few questions. We did a bunch of research on like, what is this fund? Why do they care about this? The whole pitch that they had at the time was that there's a lot of West Coast startups getting a lot of funding, but there's a very few East Coast startups that have like the same magnitude of investment going in because it's just harder to raise on the East Coast. And so I like in the intro, we're like, hey, we're the definition of doing more with less. Like we have gotten very little funding, but we like at one point had like a team of volunteers of like 40 people helping us out, all doing this as a side hustle. So like we get it. Like, and we also had grant funding at the time. And so yeah, just kind of reading up about them, understanding their ethos, aligning with their ethos, and asking really, really good questions, like really good questions, makes all the difference. And then he immediately the next day said, all right, are you free to talk to Sam? And scheduled a 10-minute call. And it was very fast, very quick call. And he basically, we didn't even pitch, literally. Like he'd already seen the pitch. So it was just going straight into questions. Like you just do your intro, explain why you're doing this, and go straight, like immediately you would start asking us questions. And, he asked us about like our go-to-market strategy, how we're going to get candidates on the platform, how we're going to get employers on the platform, what we're charging, how we think like what are different streams of like bringing on talent, etc. We were like immediately had answers for all of those. We kept it really fast and quick. And then at the end, he was like, all right, we'll get back to you in a few days. And he was like, before I go, any questions for me? And my first question was, okay, Sam, why did you take this call? Like, why do you care about this? Clearly there's something that brought you here. And his response to that, like, and that question immediately is like a spicy question, And he was like, well, I'm neurodivergent myself and my brother too. And like, I think something like this needs to exist in the world. And so that was like really awesome to hear about. And then we also mentioned it wasn't a like the question was sort of like we see a lot of demand for neurodivergent solutions across the world. Like, should we go after those or should we focus on the States? Or like how should we like expand globally? And his feedback was like just focus on America and really like nail this market first before like expanding to others. And so that was, kind of not a humble brag, but maybe a little bit because like we already see that this is so needed. Like there's clearly a global need for a solution like this. And then from there, yeah, immediately after we asked those questions, he was like, "All right, I have conviction." And then the money was wired in the next 1 to 2 business days. And that was how we went full time on Mentra. So, I mean, going back to like just having really unique and insightful questions can be powerful. And then knowing what you're about, knowing why you're there, all of that made a huge difference. And then, yeah, every time I have like really, really, really hard questions that ChatGPT can't answer or a human can't answer, or that's like, you know, unique to his life experience. Like after, the whole getting ousted from the board thing, we asked him like, "Hey, what would you do to make sure you're building a strong board of advisors? How would you tackle that?" And he had some very like timely advice because he'd just been out of that situation. So yeah, reaching out when you really have like questions, and even if they don't answer, don't take it personally. Like people are busy. But yeah, that was an incredible way to find him as a mentor. And now he's like way busier and way more famous and like talking to governments and doing all that stuff, which we love. And hopefully is like leaving the world in a better place. But yeah, thanks for the question. And thanks for y'all for staying to hear that. And yeah. I think like the more you put out into the world and keep like building on and doing the work and showing up, like the more people will see that and they'll want to like be a part of it and support you through it. So we can do more talks just like this. But yeah, as you know, huge proponent for mentorship. Keep doing it. And yeah, y'all rock. Thank you so much for joining. I know we're way over. But Steph, any last words?
No, I think that covers us on a huge high note. I love that story. And yeah, like Jhillika said, thank you so much for everyone for tuning in. This has just been another great Monday together.
Yeah. Oh, sorry. One last thing. I totally forgot to share this because we are a neurodiversity employment network. If you are neurodivergent and they are neurodivergent and you have shared life experiences of being neurodivergent, like that is just such a good way to bond. Like Steph, you met with an influencer last week in New York, right? And you just talked about like your quirky traits of like being neurodivergent. And I met with them later and they were like, yeah, of course I remember Steph. We had this great conversation about being like neurodivergent. And someone else apparently came up to them and was like, what are y'all talking about? And they were like, we're talking about being neurodivergent. And the person was like, what's that? And Steph was like, and you were like, all right, that's gonna be a tough question, like to answer. But yeah, there's like some, lived experience that like brings y'all together. Tapping on that too. And neurodivergence is a big part of that. Because yeah, when you think different and other people think different and you can like bond about that, that just creates like this immense connection of like being outside the norm and not fitting in and like uniting in that is pretty cool as well. Yeah, it's like finding members of your tribe. Exactly. It's like, all right, we never fit in, but now here we are and we accept each other for that. But awesome. Thanks so much for joining, y'all. Have a wonderful rest of your day and keep like letting us know how we could be helpful. And we're so excited to launch this app soon. Hopefully, it will drive a ton of value. We're also hosting an office hours this Friday to get feedback from everyone as like early beta testers before it goes live to our community of 58,000 people. So if you want to join for that too, we will send that out via email to everyone who joined today. All right, Steph, everyone, have a great day. We like to log off with 3, 2, 1, Mentra. Take care.
Thanks, everyone. Bye.